My name's Sam Crutzen. I'm Microsoft IT's SharePoint Operations Manager.
Hi, my name's Nate Bruno. I work with Sam as a SharePoint Service Engineer for Microsoft IT. Our group is responsible for internal hosting of SharePoint for Microsoft.
We want to thank you for joining us. Today we're going to talk about initial best practices and lessons learned from Microsoft IT's upgrade of SharePoint 2010.
What you're going to learn is steps on how Microsoft IT upgraded SharePoint 2007 to SharePoint 2010, some of our IT upgrade philosophies, as well as some of our pain points and lessons learned.
The goal of this talk is to help you prepare to accomplish a successful upgrade to 2010 with minimal issues or downtime.
Since this video is short, we won't cover everything that went into our upgrade process. So we outlined the key points and major issues that we've seen common in upgrade deployments to 2010. Before we get started, Sam provided an outline of what went into our Microsoft IT best practice for setting up a successful upgrade.
Thanks, Nate. The 5 key components to our team's upgrade philosophy were: detect issues early. Number 2, keep site admins informed. Number 3, perform the upgrade with no data loss. Number 4, minimize downtime. And number 5, minimize impact to our user base. The rest of our discussion will be framed around these principles. Now first, let's talk about our approach to detecting issues early. We were able to identify many issues early by setting up a pre-production environment that closely mirrored our production environment. This environment allowed us to dry run our upgrade and share the result with key members of our user base. Doing so allowed our team to easily troubleshoot many issues before we did the actual production content upgrade to 2010. Next, let's talk about our communication strategy. In order to keep site admins and site owners informed, we set up distribution lists containing anyone who is a site owner or administrator, websites which described our upgrade process and our known issues, and finally our upgrade schedule. By having a clear line of communication with each site collection owner, we were able to let them know when the upgrades were happening and to allow a certain upgrade window for downtime.
Now Sam, is it true that you have to take downtime when going through stages of the upgrade?
Well, actually, we were able to use an old feature in a new way to minimize user-facing downtime. Using alternate access mappings, or AAM, we configured SharePoint 2010 so that it would redirect users to a read-only farm if a site weren't found. This enabled our users to access their content in a read-only fashion while we were upgrading their content, while also giving us an easy rollback plan for individual site collections in case the upgrade for that site weren't entirely successful. Naturally, the caveat here is that you need at least double the amount of storage to accommodate both the read-only farm content as well as the new upgraded content.
Ah, that makes sense.
Our third upgrade principle was that we needed to upgrade the content with no data loss. This was achieved via a combination of taking the production databases offline at the start of our upgrade, redirecting users to a downtime page for the production farm while we restored the latest backup of the databases to our read-only farm, then detaching the production databases and attaching them to the new 2010 farm.
You know, that brings up a good point. We recommend using the detach-attach method for upgrading to 2010. Not only is it potentially faster, but SharePoint 2010 will only run on 64-bit server hardware. For a lot of you out there running SharePoint 2007 farms, it's a good approach to migrating away from your 32-bit OS and hardware.
Great. Now the fourth principle for our upgrade process was that we wanted to do it with minimal downtime. This was accomplished by attaching the content databases using the new parallel upgrade feature in SharePoint 2010. We were able to process multiple database upgrades at the same time, thus reducing downtime for our end users.
If you want to find more information about this technique, Sam and I recorded another IT Showcase video specifically on parallel upgrades that you can view or download.
Once our team felt comfortable testing the upgrade over and over again in pre-production, we were ready to take the deployment plan straight to production. The final detail was that we had taken into account the difference in scale between SharePoint 2007 and 2010.
That brings up a good point. From SharePoint 2007 to SharePoint 2010, we nearly had to double our server count. In a typical 2007 farm, you might have 2 web servers, 1 application server, and a SQL server. When we moved to SharePoint 2010, there were so many great new features in the app layer that we had to add some extra resources to support them. Another point to mention is the usage database for the usage and health monitoring service. Although very useful, this database takes a huge amount of SQL I/O and a large storage footprint, and we recommend that you put it on a separate SQL server so that it doesn't impact the performance of your farm.
Sometimes I get really excited talking about all the new features in SharePoint 2010. Not only Office web applications like Word, Access, PowerPoint, and Excel Server, but also managed metadata, Power Pivot, usage and health monitoring, and the list goes on. It's easy to forget the necessity for the larger 2010 farms to support these new features.
And you know, your database administrator might have a surprise as well, since each one of these features creates their own database. In the visual on the screen, you can see a quick comparison between the number of databases in SharePoint 2007 and 2010. As you can see on the right, a farm with the new features enabled can add a number of additional databases to be managed. It's a little extra work for us in IT, but our users are telling us that the new features are worth the effort. So I can appreciate your enthusiasm, Sam, since the new features are really cool, but just wanted to mention it's something that you'll want to watch out for and plan accordingly.
Thanks, Nate. Our final goal was to complete the upgrade while minimizing the customer angst that can accompany any new software release. Our approach here was to use the new Visual Upgrade feature. This feature allowed us to retain the SharePoint 2007 look and feel for existing sites. As a result, after the upgrade, users' sites looked practically identical to what they had in the 2007 interface.
Another cool part of this feature is the customer can change their site UI to the new look and feel of SharePoint 2010 at their convenience.
Using this upgrade philosophy, we were able to execute our upgrade within our planned window and with limited downtime. Now it's time to admit that even though we thought we had an excellent upgrade strategy, we did run into a few problems. The biggest issues we ran into were, first, the super user account issue. Second, a new throttling feature in 2010. And third, a few customization issues. Now the first one, the super user account issue, would cause problems if users either had a publishing page or if blob cache was enabled on the farm previously. The impact of missing this step was that users would hit the portal and get an access denied message. To avoid this, there is a super user account that needs to be created and configured on the farm in order for the pages to be rendered properly. The second issue dealt with throttling. In SharePoint 2007, it was known that very large libraries and lists could have a negative impact on both site and farm performance. As such, Microsoft issued a best practice for our users to limit their lists and libraries to 2,000 items or less to minimize the impact on performance. Unfortunately, in SharePoint 2007, there was no way for an IT department to enforce this best practice. Now in SharePoint 2010, this policy is enforceable and fully configurable in central administration. We kept the default settings in our environment so that users who had grown lists over 5,000 items would get an error message saying that their data could not be viewed. For users impacted by this change, we were able to configure temporary exemptions to the limit using a PowerShell command that could be run on the farm so that they could go in and reconfigure their site lists to be under the site limit. The third major issue we dealt with was customization. The visual upgrade feature ensured that most sites upgraded fine or with only minor visual defects. Fixing the rest required either some rework in SharePoint Designer or a reset of the site to site definition.
And we were lucky not to have too many customization issues, since most of our farms had limited server-side customizations installed. We've included a reference to a TechNet article at the end of the video where you can find more information on strategies that deal with upgrading customizations in SharePoint 2010 to avoid most issues.
Overall, our upgrade at Microsoft went much smoother than the 2003 to 2007 SharePoint upgrade. Some takeaways from the upgrade include: make sure to consider our upgrade philosophy as a good starting point. Think about the amount of hardware that will change in your 2010 deployment. Using these, hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of our lessons learned and not make the same mistakes we did when you upgrade your production farm to SharePoint 2010.
If you have questions about upgrading to SharePoint 2010, check the resources we've listed on the screen and check out my SharePoint IT blog at blogs.technet.com/nathber.
Thank you for joining us and see you next time.